1992. And so you get a democratic dividend. There's a renewal of faith in Ghana's democracy and stability. And so we're reaping that dividend. But secondly, we've had to do a reset. We call it a reset because there's a lot we had to correct that hadn't gone well over the last 8 years. And so we had to present a budget that was quite austere, cut government financing, put in place mechanisms to increase revenue, to be able to look inward because we had been shut out of the international capital market because of debt default. And so a lot of the slippages that had occurred in the program, for instance, especially on the primary balance, we needed to do a steep correction. And so when we met with the IMF for the last review, we got staff level agreements because of the adjustments that we had made. And so I think that it's raised business confidence. Everybody thinks that we're on the right track. And so far so good. Easy does it.
But you did tell me earlier, you're just getting started and there's still a lot more work. What's your top priority right now? Even though you are getting signals from the markets, from the currency stabilizing, what still keeps you up at night a bit?
We, of course, still the focus is on the macroeconomy, trying to stabilize the situation, build confidence, bring back investments. And I think that we're on the right track. I'm cautiously optimistic, and it doesn't keep me awake at night yet, but I think we're on the right path, and one just needs to keep his hands on the steer to make sure that we keep the course.
And that brings me to the topic at hand today, and that is the oil sector, which has, prior to you being in office, been a bit of a sore point for the Ghanaian economy. What do you think has been some of the main challenges with this for Ghana?
I think that the environment got a bit toxic. I don't know for what reason. Government did not seem to prioritize the sector. And so there was a lot of disinvestment. They had little squabbles with all the oil investors. For instance, with Tallow, there was a squabble over taxes. And I think that, it was something that they could have resolved. Tallow went into arbitration and won the arbitration before we came into office. And so on the rest of the issues left to that were in dispute, we are sitting with Tallow and we're resolving them. And I think that that's the way it should go. Oil and gas, oil is in transition. And so, everybody who has any assets should be pumping like there's no tomorrow. And so, I would lay a red carpet to anybody who wants to drill and pump oil to do so. Because, in the next decade, 2 decades, I think that the world would have made a transition to renewables. So the environment was toxic. E&I had a dispute with another local company. Government took the side of the local company and asked that they should unitize. And a dispute occurred. E&I was held in contempt. They had to move all their expatriate management to Côte d'Ivoire for several years. And so we saw a decline in production of about 7% annually. And so oil and gas is down, but investor confidence has come back. New commitments are being made to produce more gas and oil.
Talk about some of those commitments that you are getting at this point.
For instance, we're going to build a second gas stream, which will handle more gas coming out of our first field, that's Jubilee. The Jubilee partners, Tallow and Cosmos, are able to put more gas on stream. And so we need a second gas stream to handle that because our current plant in the Trouble cannot handle the extra gas. And then E&I are back, and they are drilling again. And the early signals are that we might find considerable quantities of oil and gas. And when that happens, we're using our gas entirely to produce power. And so we have a gas to power policy. Currently, in our thermal generation, I think about 70 to 80% is gas-fired. But then we have another 20% for which we use light crude oil and HFO and diesels and things. And so we want over the next few years to eliminate the use of liquid fuels and use entirely gas so that we can bring down the cost factor in our power production.
Do you think that is within the 5-year pipeline? How far out would you say that?
Well, I think if we put in the second gas train and ENI turns the taps, we get more gas. Nigeria has also promised to increase our gas supply through the West African gas pipeline. So I think over the next 3 to 4 years, we should be able to eliminate crude oil completely.
Was that something that you came back into office thinking that was important to reset the economy? I wonder how high up on the list of priorities was
the
that?
energy sector has been number one in terms of priority on my, to be divine about it, my second coming. And so
it's been a good second coming, I'd say.
Well, Jesus is coming too, so.
That's true.
And so on my second coming, we messed up energy sector with debts of almost 2.5 billion owed to independent power producers, to gas suppliers and everybody. And so what the previous government started it, but we're continuing it. They've been trying to renegotiate the debt and then see how we can ring fence it. We have some strategies for dealing with it. And I'm sure that by the end of the year, early next year, we should be able to make everybody happy, in terms of, dealing with that debt. We need to clean the slate, but in cleaning that slate, we must look at the whole value chain, because a lot of the problem is coming from downstream, the distribution end, because of the state-owned utility. ECG is not as efficient in collecting revenue. We are experiencing technical and commercial losses of about 40%. And I think it's only a state-owned enterprise that can survive when you're losing 40% of your revenue. And so we are going into the phase of private sector participation in the billing and metering to bring private sector efficiency in the revenue collection so that we can pay for the power we take from the independent power producers. We established a cash waterfall mechanism where ECG's revenues were supposed to be shared proportionately so that everybody got something every month. Unfortunately, it was not followed, and so a lot of debt accrued. We've gone back to the cash waterfall mechanism and we're adhering to it properly. So everybody is seeing something every month while we fix the distribution end.
You talk about privatization. Have you seen or heard of interest from private investors to tap into the downstream economy?
Yeah, people are queuing up. I said they should wait. We're going to do expressions of interest. We just got the report from the committee that's advising us on how to do it. And they gave us 3 options. One option was to go to one concession holder for the whole country to do the billing and metering. The other was to, if I remember, was to divide into concession areas and have multiple partners working with us in this billing and metering. And so government is yet to take a decision. It's going to come to cabinet, and cabinet will decide on which option we're going for. And then we'll do an expression of interest, and then it's open to, there must be Ghanaian participation, there must be local participation. So even if it's an international company bidding, it must have a local partner.
You said everyone will be happy eventually, right?
I'm sure by next year our partners would be happy because we would have dealt, appropriately with the debt overhang.
Well, and that's been fascinating to watch a number of African leaders like yourself balance the appeal of some of these international finance institutions while also tackling domestic issues at home and maybe frustration from some Ghanaians. How do you see some of these reforms you're talking about affecting the Ghanaian economy and still appeasing some of these international institutions?
Well, I think that it's important to be in partnership with the rest of the world and other companies that come from outside. But we also have our obligations in terms of providing social services to our people, making sure we have good health care and that our education is of the right quality to produce the kind of human resource that we need. And so balancing it out, it's not easy. I mean, 2.5 billion, I could use that, to go a long way in terms of social services, but I have to pay it. Some of it is accrued interest for non-payment and all that. But I do think that they are not exclusive of each other. Energy is important, You can't grow an economy without energy. And so it's just as critical as it is to provide social services. And so how you balance them out and make sure that you do not entirely jeopardize, access to social services of your people is what leadership is all about.
Do you worry about frustration, though, potentially unrest if people are upset about some of the policies that you're enacting?
Happily, we're still in what I call the honeymoon period, and so people are patient with us, and I'm hoping that we can run as fast as possible before their patience begins to wear out. But so far, so good. I sleep well. Not yet sleepless nights.
Wow, I don't think there's a lot of leaders that say they sleep well tonight, but I don't know. I'm not a leader.
Not yet sleepless nights. I mean, once the ship is on course and you're doing the right things, I do think that we'll be fine.
Let's talk about, because the last time we spoke, you were talking about a changing world order, which we did see just about 2 months ago. It is consistently changing. How do you see Ghana and more broadly the African continent positioning itself, given, and you talk about oil, and the title of the session is about oil. We're seeing fluctuating oil prices because of what the U.S. president is doing, because of what OPEC is doing. How do you square all of these different factors?
We're a bit lucky in Ghana because even though we still are not where we want to be in terms of diversified exports, even in the export of primary products and raw material, we are a bit more diversified than other countries because we rely on our major exports are gold, followed by oil and gas, and then cocoa. Cocoa used to be the biggest export item for Ghana. I think it's about number 3 now because of a loss of production due to climate change, but it's building back up. And so while oil is gone down, we benefit from the gas because I think that gas is more beneficial to Ghana than the oil because we're using gas to produce power. And it allows us to produce power comparatively lower than if we were using light crude oil completely. Fortunately, the West African power pool is operational, and so any excess power we're able to evacuate to Burkina Faso and other countries. And so that's a good thing. But in all the unpredictability of the world, and when the world gets unpredictable, one commodity that increases in price is gold. And there's gold everywhere in Ghana from the south to the north. In the past, when we were young, when there was a thunderstorm and you went out, you could pick little specks of gold in the gold-producing areas of Ghana.
So gold, I need to go to Ghana.
Gold production has increased, and the price is good. And so Ghana is earning a lot more from gold. And so even though we're still producers of raw materials, we have a diversified portfolio of natural resources, gold, cocoa, and oil. So oil might not be doing well, but cocoa and gold are doing well. If we're able to increase cocoa production, that should bring in more export earnings here.
And lithium is also...
lithium, manganese, bauxite.
Can you talk, especially with lithium, and we talk about renewables,
yeah.
Where does that fit into the bigger equation for the economy and the economic benefits of the transition as well?
Those are the rare earth minerals, and we found quite a big quantity of lithium. It's yet to be approved. There's a concession that has been granted. It's waiting to be approved by Parliament. And once that is done, then we have to work the logistics of it, how to start the exploitation. And so that is waiting to happen. But we do export manganese and bauxite in addition.
Is this important for African economies like Ghana and others to continue with this green metals mining, especially when you think about the wider EV push that we're seeing globally? How do you square that with also oil and crude?
I think we should work gradually to add value to what we produce. If you take the petroleum sector, of course, we're adding value to the gas by producing electricity with it and exporting it. If you take the crude oil, we export most of the crude oil. When I was president, we delivered our first parcel to our refinery to process into petroleum products for use in our country. Unfortunately, the refinery broke down, and so the crude oil was not processed. Eventually, the parcel was sold out at a discount. But there's a new refinery built by a Chinese investor, and once we increase the production of light crude, we probably will try and see if that refinery can use that crude. And if it can, then it means we'll process it locally and provide petroleum products in country. But with regards to all the others, if you take cocoa production, I think that we have processing capacity for about 40 to 50% of the total cocoa that we produce. And I am a believer in producing more locally and adding value to the cocoa than just exporting the raw beans. So over the next 4 years, we're going to see how increasingly we can reduce the amount of raw beans that we export and produce cocoa liquor, rum, cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and all the things that go into cocoa products. With regards to gold, we have a refinery, but it's not just having a refinery. You need to work to have the refinery registered under LBMA to be able to access the international market. So even though we have a refinery, it is not LBMA certified. And so we cannot immediately make full utilization of adding value to our gold. And so right now we export it in bullion form, but we've had discussions with the owner of the refinery. It's called the Gold Coast Refinery, and trying to see how we can work with him to get the appropriate certification so that we can process some of that gold locally.
How do you add value to, you mentioned lithium, bauxite, how do you see adding value to some of these exports, especially, again, as we continue to see more of an EV and renewable push globally?
With bauxite, for many years, we've been looking to integrate the full value chain from our first republic, our first president, the alumina, and then we smelt it and produce aluminium for the market. But Ghana has huge reserves of bauxite, and so for many years we've wanted to set up a refinery to refine the bauxite into alumina and supply our aluminium smelter. We've not achieved it yet, but I think that the strategy and the plan are there to be able to achieve it, because if you go inland, there's a reserve in Ashanti region called Yunahi that has huge quantities of bauxite. And so we're looking for investors that will partner with us to both exploit the bauxite, but also build an alumina refinery so that some of that alumina can be fed into the Volta Aluminium Company smelter to produce electricity for export. There's a company producing manganese that have promised to establish a manganese refinery. With the lithium, we are looking to go into secondary production, not just export the raw lithium. And so that's part of the discussion with the concession holder to be able to process the lithium to a certain level before we export it.
So that's still longer term plans?
Longer term, yeah.
Before we finish, when we think longer term, there is a lot of discussion about transition and many African states not being reliant on fossil fuels to power their economy. What do you see as your plan for Ghana to curb fossil fuels while still trying to industrialize and use it to the benefit that it can be right now?
We all know we're in transition to green energy. And so we passed the Renewable Energy Act, which stipulates that at least 10% of our energy mix, should come from renewable sources. I'm ashamed to say we are under 3% at the moment. I think 2.71% of our total power production is renewable, and it's mainly in the solar space. Solar, Ghana has a comparative advantage to produce solar because we have abundant sunlight. Indeed, if we could export sunlight, we would be one of the richest countries in the world. And so increasing our capacity in solar in terms of, bigger solar power generation, but not only there, but also household solar, mini-grid solar. I mean, there are many options that we could look at. And so refining it to get the optimum is what we are at the moment. We've given licenses to several companies to begin to set up, large-scale solar, 20 megawatts, 50 megawatts, and 100 megawatts, so that we can catch up with at least a 10% power from renewable sources. But I think that the time has come also for us to follow in the footsteps of some of the Scandinavian countries, including Germany, where people can invest in solar on their households and feed any excess into the national grid. We do not yet have the regulation to be able to do that. I have a farm where I've installed solar. I'm producing more solar than I need. The utility have given me a meter that allows me to feed the excess power in. So as a responsible citizen, I did so. And so I'm feeding all the excess solar power into the grid. But they say there's no policy to pay me for the solar. So it's become a charity.
Are you okay with that?
So I have a personal interest to make sure that we're able to be paid for the solar that we put into the grid.
Would you, you talk about legislation.
I declare my conflict of interest.
Okay, you would declare it? Thank you. Not everybody does that. I appreciate that. You talk about legislation. Is that something that you're actually thinking about longer term?
Yeah. Actually, the Ministry of, that's why we call the Ministry of Energy and Green Transition. Yeah, and so we've reset that ministry to have a broader view of energy other than what it was traditionally. And so they're looking at the medium term, the longer term, where we should be at between now and 2040, 2050.
So fossil fuels, though, right now, still a part of your agenda?
Yeah, we're going to gradually eliminate fossil fuels from our power production, like I said. I believe that within the next 4 years, with the kind of investments that are taking place, we should be able to generate 100% on natural gas. And if we put in more solar, then we're going to rely mainly on those two. But in the foreseeable future, for public transportation, especially moving goods and services, heavy trucks, and all that, we're going to have to continue to rely on oil and diesel.
Well, we're run out of time, and we know your time is very precious, so I really appreciate the time with you, Your Excellency John Mahama, President of Ghana. Please, everyone, join me in giving them.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.